Hello, it's Scott Manley here. It's been about a week since Kerbal Space Program 2 launched into early access with, more bugs than gameplay, but I've been having a lot of fun in the last week, spending some time getting to know it, getting to understand the good things and the bad things, and there are good things here hidden underneath the rough of this very early access. For example, I actually think the tutorials are a pretty good thing to have for new players. On the other hand, I would say that this is early access, it's $50, and you probably shouldn't be having new players playing this when there's the original available at lower price. I, on the other hand, look at the tutorials as options, environments for challenges. For example, I've been trying to fly under the bridges in the Kerbal Space Center using this rocket, which is ill-designed for the purpose. And I haven't quite succeeded yet. But you can actually do some cool stuff with this. It seems to have more than enough control authority so I can do basically the equivalent of an airborne rocket-powered handbrake turn and then transition into a vertical landing near the launch pad. And if that isn't Kerbal, I don't know what is, right? If this is the wrong thing to do in Kerbal Space Program, I don't want to be right. While the Kerbal system is basically the same as the original game, the same planets, roughly the same sizes, there's a few changes here and there. There's been a lot of updates. For example, this is Jewel now, which instead of being sort of a green haze, has very well-defined, fluffy green clouds. And by the way, if you do take an aircraft down, be very wary of the stability assist system because at 7 kilometers per second, it will destroy your aircraft if you don't turn it off in time. Honestly, I found the stability control system not great for aircraft. In fact, frequently fails for the rockets right now. I tend to fly most of the aircraft right now just using trim inputs. That's where you hold Alt and press one of the direction keys, and that is, changes the 0 point. I used that to actually fly all the way around Kerbin in a simple little aircraft. This thing was so stable, I literally at one point took the dog for a walk and came back 20 minutes later, and it was still within 2 degrees of the course that I had set it. This also led to the discovery of probably the weirdest bug that I found in the game so far, and that is that specific engine, the Weasley, as you fly around Kerbin for a very long time, it starts to move around with respect to the vehicle. And in fact, that isn't stuck on the back anymore, it's just sort of like hanging out there in space. Behaving in exactly the way that jet engines don't. Also, I can confirm that the developers' claims of having slain the Kraken are false. The Kraken lives in this hole. Actually, the Kraken probably lives in many other places, but this is the Moho, a hole in the planet of Moho. So it was in the original game as a terrain glitch at the poles when you're doing a spherical mapping. They had made a mistake in the top row and they had this massive hole. So we demanded that they keep it in the game, and it's in here. You can fly down it, and down at the bottom it does appear to be a flat area to land, which was more than you got with the original Moho. However, for some reason, the terrain colliders, the geometry isn't quite there, and by not quite there, I mean you literally fall through it. And once you fall through it, you're inside the planet, you have nothing to stand on, so you'll sort of accelerate downwards. And, they basically just treat the gravitational potential of this planet as an inverse square law, which is not really correct when you're actually falling into a solid body, but whatever. That means that the forces will go to infinity near the center. And infinities in physics don't do good things, and especially in this case where you're modeling things using discrete time steps, what happens once you get very close to the middle is, you accelerate and you get kicked out. That was us getting kicked out. We are now moving at over 100 kilometers per second. Not only do we have enough velocity to escape back to the surface, we fly through the surface, head off into deep space, and in fact we're going so fast that even the gravity of the sun will not hold us in place. I'm sure I will learn to exploit this power for awesome at some point. Of course, these aren't the bugs that people are complaining about. These are the bugs we expected to happen. The bugs that people are complaining about are things like apparently pressing the M key, depending upon your system, may automatically take you to the map, which is very annoying if you're trying to save a file and it takes you to the map and it destroys the craft you're building. Or there are glitches with the physics, which sometimes result in your rocket spinning absolutely out of control. There's many steps backwards in terms of your UI and building spacecraft. I've noticed that the physics system that worked so well in the original game has somehow regressed, and if you look, the perihelion value in the bottom left is decreasing. The orbit is becoming more eccentric, despite the fact that this Kerbal is just floating around in formation with another spacecraft. This isn't tidal forces, this isn't joint strengths or something. This is some problem with the floating origin that is translating to a change in the orbit, which is not great, and it's something they need to fix. And then, of course, there's the performance problems. And yes, a lot of these performance problems are because there's a lot of geometry which hasn't really been distilled down into an optimized form. Take this aircraft. So actually, I've just moved the camera inside the cockpit. If you have this cockpit, you are including all that geometry in your game. The hairstyles have tens of thousands of polygons. The decals are used for the light have hundreds of polygons assigned to them. That is one thing that they are going to fix. It's not a big performance hit, but it's low-hanging fruit. But the biggest single performance problem seems to be down to the terrain engine, which is putting some very large shaders on the GPU, which really need optimized. And so the devs put out an update on Friday, which pretty much laid out all the bugs they think they're going to get fixed in the next few weeks. Some of them will improve performance. The terrain will not get a big fix just yet. But there's things they did which are really helpful. For example, did you know if you select a vehicle and then press Control-C, then say go over to a text editor and paste, then you actually get the JSON description, the save data for that spacecraft. And you can then actually select that from the editor, perhaps after making some changes, and then paste that back into the hangar and you've got the spacecraft. This is an amazingly useful thing, and I hope it remains in the game. If you actually want to find your spacecraft, they are in App Data Local Low Intercept Games Kerbal Space Program 2. Also in here, there is this global directory with the physics settings that some people have been saying tweak these to make your rockets more rigid. Devs have said, please stop doing that, it's making their job hard, but it's up to you. In the save directory, however, you have all your saved games. You have the JSON file, which is the actual save game that you can edit, and you can pop this open in Notepad++ and say, for example, find an orbit and change a spacecraft to be in orbit around the moon instead of Kerbin. Obviously, it's a good idea to make sure you're moving the right spacecraft before you do this. Also, don't move it inside the planet because things will fail. Workspaces also contains all the save files for your spacecraft. And there are Easter eggs to be found. I have no idea what this is, but it looks like a cross between a Kerbal, a Cthulhu, and a Buddha. If you look around the moon, you might find that the moon arches are now, they're different. So in the original Kerbal, the moon arches would be these natural-looking arches of rock, which were very cool for flying under at great speed if you were showing off. But now they have had the rock broken off them, and they look like some sort of metallic golden monument with lights on them that correspond to the planets in the Kerbal System. These kind of discoveries are so profound that any Kerbal astronaut will no doubt find themselves lost for words. That'll be another one of the Kerbal animations they added. One of the things that is generally agreed upon is that the soundtrack is a huge step up. There's a lot of different music for different planets. Now, some of the planets share themes. The music is itself also reactive, so as you descend towards the surface, it sort of adds in more drums because, you're now on a collision course with a planet. Will you run out of fuel? Let's turn up those drums and bring the drama. It's great. The general sound design is a huge improvement over the original game. Although I am disappointed that nowhere in it do we hear the original Kerbal Space Program fanfare. I'm sort of worried that might be precluded from this due to licensing issues over who owns it. There's a lot of early people are involved or no longer involved, and it may not be clear who actually owns the rights to the Kerbal theme. I don't know. I don't know why that's not turned up in the game, the sequel. It's the iconic theme is not in the sequel. One thing we were told not to expect was mods, but well, developers got at it, and within 12 hours we had a working mod loader in the form of Space Warp. It has already been superseded by a newer one, and there are a handful of mods already available, including custom flags and the ability to re-enable the debug menu, which had been disabled. Which is a shame, because I actually used the debug menu at the event in Europe to, actually access some planets that I would have otherwise taken me a lot of time. I've tended to stick with building simpler spacecraft. You try to build anything complicated, maybe the build system breaks on you, or you find some random collider issue which destroys your spacecraft on orbit. But if you can get the parts into space and dock them together, that seems to be a whole lot more reliable. And with some of the new parts, you can literally build a rocket that will go anywhere in the Kerbal system using like only 5 parts. You basically start with the little command module, you use the extra large hydrogen tank, you find the swerve nuclear engine at the bottom, and of course you'll need a little stack separator because that won't give you the thrust you need at liftoff, but the Clydesdale solid rocket motor will. So pop those in the oven and light them up on the launch pad. Appreciate the awesome effects one more time. And by the way, that is entirely cosmetic. If your rocket engine is pointing the wrong way, it'll still generate that very cool cloud of steam. Makes no sense, but hey, it works for some people. Yeah, this is, it gets you most of the way to the upper atmosphere. You just need to lob this thing sufficiently high that the acceleration from that engine will get you. I mean, honestly, this reminds me of the amateur rocket bowling ball launch challenge, where you have to launch something dumb on a rocket. I'm sure this design may need some tweaking if they fix the aerodynamics and the electrics, because this doesn't really actually have any onboard electrical production other than the nuclear engines. But look, it does actually give you a sort of hint at where the larger, higher power, higher tech engines will be taking you, their capabilities and their parts. It has enough delta V to drop you into the sun via a direct transfer, if that is your kind of thing. Or maybe aviation is more what you want to be doing and you want to be landing on the roof of the parking garage. I mean, it's not like the ramps inside work, so you have to land on the top with a plane. Or maybe you don't want to even leave the ground and you want to set land speed records on those excessively long runways. This is my best effort. I think that under ideal circumstances it gets up to about 10,040. Obviously, I had to add lots of wheels because it has a habit of rolling over. Also, given the aerodynamics, this has a very interesting recovery process. Like, I originally included a parachute, but then found that it would happen to sink to the bottom of the ocean, which didn't seem like an ideal way to end a speed record. So instead, we glide down above the runway, deploy the parachute, and if luck is on our side, we can land without breaking anything. And if we remember to apply the brakes, we will even stop moving. So yeah, a week on from release, Kerbal Space Program 2, well, we know where it's going. We know it still has a lot of bugs. I still advise only buying it if you are a Kerbal fan who's played the original game and wants to get an early step up on what is coming next. If you're a new player, buy the original. In fact, it's like 75% off on Steam as I speak. You'll have a lot more fun and a lot less frustration if you start with the original. But myself, I'm still enjoying pushing the limits, breaking things, learning things, and going places. I'm Scott Manley. Fly safe.